Recording in progress. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our fourth and final session of the 2024 Lessons in Leadership series. We are very excited that you all could be here today. We're going to be a small but mighty team, and that's okay. We have some friends who are taking care of some kiddos and doing some stuff this spring. So we're going to record. We're going to send all of the recordings to everyone that signed up and registered. But in the meantime, we have a lot of great information to learn from the author. So I am not going to prolong this too much. So today, our fourth and final Lessons in Leadership series. Today's where we're going to put it all together. We're going to do a little recapping of what we have been through together in the first three sessions. And then we're going to have some pre-recorded clips from the author who will answer some questions that the LGH team had in the planning of this series. So thank you all for being here again. Thank you to everyone who has graciously given their time and energy to serve as a facilitator. We're super excited. This is a highlight for us each year. Leadership is a lifelong journey. There's always more to learn. And this is one great opportunity that we can provide to our network for learning to occur. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to get my paperwork in a row so I can start the party. Come on, Andre. Please do go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Since I will be playing videos today, it's hard for me to manage the chat. So our president, Larissa Kaki, and our senior director, May Maloney, will be monitoring that. But please do, if you can, join us on camera. We want to see you. We want you to be as active as possible within the chat. Again, there's so much wisdom in this room already. So please feel free to share, to add on, to question. If you are having any technology issues, please do message Leadership Greater Hartford directly, and our colleague Anna will help you with that. We do want you to be engaged. We are going to do the traditional breakout rooms in the last 20 minutes or so of today's session. So please stay on for that. And again, the joke here at LGH is that these sessions are like Vegas. We want you to share what you've learned with the world, but please don't share anyone else's personal story. That's only for each individual to share. So I'm smiling. I'm ready to go. Hopefully you're all ready to go. See lots of coffee mugs in people's hands, so that's a good sign. Here we go. We do want to extend a huge thank you to our series sponsor, Express Strategies, a strategic communications and public policy consulting business founded in 2012. We will put the link for Express Strategies in the chat if you want to learn more about this dynamic group of individuals. Thank you to Bernard Cavalier, former board member and lifelong friend, for finding the value in this morning series. We appreciate you and all that you do for the communities that you serve as well. In addition, we have year-long sponsorships that we call visionary sponsors. These partners have invested in all of LGH's programs and events throughout the year, including some that we're going to talk about at the very end of the session. So stay tuned. But we have an amazing list of supporters here. If any of you are interested in joining the cause, we're going to pop in Larissa's email into the chat so you can connect directly with her to learn about all the wonderful options and opportunities of being a visionary sponsor. We love connecting, so share what you're learning with the world. Follow us on all of our social media handles. The more engaged you are, the more excited we get. So please connect and engage. So it's hard to believe this is our fourth and final session. We've had some robust, deep conversations, some great learning from some amazing humans, one of which I know is in the room today. I'll give her a shout out when we get there. But we're super excited to talk about inclusion on purpose and to really bring some of the principles and practices from Rachika Tulshian to life throughout this series. So again, we're going to hear a lot from the author later on. So I'm just going to do some quick recaps. Again, populate that chat, say hello to one another. This is about creating a spirit of community, so get engaged. So our first session, can't believe it was so long ago, but we had the great opportunity to hear from Mari Serrano. with The Connection, who shared a lot of dynamic information about power, about privilege, about intersectionality. I'm sharing their slides directly. So we talked about the cycle of oppression. And I think back to when I was teaching my nieces and nephews some of this as they were questioning, how can people hate one another? And those 4 words in the middle are really what we come back to, right? It's people question, people are fearful, people may not know, people may be insecure. And all of that leads to this cycle of discrimination, of marginalizing communities, of making people feel powerless instead of powerful. And we know our job as leaders is to elevate and to lift and to support and to encourage. And so Mari did a beautiful job walking us through this cycle, reminding us each of the power that we individually hold and how to bring some of that to light in some of the conversations when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, best practices. I'm not going to go much deeper than that. Hopefully you joined us for the first session. If not, let us know and we can definitely get you the recording so you can continue to learn from Mari, because she did it much better than I did. But we also talked about intersectionality, and this is for those of us who've been studying diversity, equity, and inclusion for a while. This is something that we're having conversations about in all of leadership practices, right? I am not just one thing, right? I'm a construct. I am a bundle, a grouping of identities. And so some are visible, some aren't visible. Some change over time, some don't. And so it's really important for us as humans to provide opportunities. First, we have to create the safe and brave spaces so that those conversations can occur. And then we have to provide opportunities for us to really dive deeper into who we all are, our lived experiences, what we've been through in our lives, and talk about the power, privilege, and experiences that we've all had. And so it's super important for us. If you've never studied anything of Kimberly Crenshaw, this is a dynamic tool for deeper connection. I see people are still entering this chat. I love that. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here again this morning. If you're just popping in, we're just doing a quick recap on the first few sessions. But thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Mari Serrano. Can I get some snaps and claps for Mari from The Connection, who did a beautiful job of sharing her lived experiences, their lived experiences, and just really helping us dive deeper into celebrating all of our identities, not just the visible ones, and not just the ones that we share, but creating brave spaces so we can enter as our full, authentic selves. The second session, we had Dr. Miller with us, who spent time talking about empathy and belonging, right? I believe she quoted Brene Brown when she said, fitting in is the opposite of belonging, right? Oftentimes, leaders think that we're creating these opportunities for everyone to fully show up. And we as leaders have to remind ourselves that, could we be doing more? Could we be doing better? And how do we have some of those conversations so that we do put the heart back into leadership? We do talk about our emotions and our lived experiences and how we're showing up in the workplace. It's super important to have those conversations. And I really love this diagram that Dr. Miller used on inclusive leadership. It reminds us that we all see the world through our own lens. And so if you've studied any of our leadership courses or personality tools that we use, it's about getting off of your own park bench and visiting other park benches so that you can truly understand how others see the world, share how you see the world, and really come to find mutual respect and understanding. So that judgment, so that the cycle of oppression is not deepened or. All right, totally forgot where I was going with that. If you couldn't tell, that was an awkward silence. I apologize. It's early for me too, folks. We're all humans. Thank you for giving me a little grace. More people are still coming. This is awesome. All right, welcome, friends. And then, last but certainly not least, we had Michelle Carr, the Executive Director of Leadership Rhode Island, who I think I saw pop in the room. Let's all give it up for Michelle Carr, who taught us about psychological safety, right? Some of the concepts that I shared a little earlier. And Michelle brought to life Rachika's book beautifully by teaching us the ADAPT framework and the responsibility that we each have as leaders to ensure that the culture, ensure that the environment, ensure that the organization and the team is set up for success. And these are some tools that Rachika shared on how to do just that, right? At the end of the day, we all want to be seen, heard, and valued, no exceptions ever. And so Michelle did a beautiful job walking us through some of these concepts. And we're thrilled to have Leadership Rhode Island in the house today. We'll share more about future partnerships and opportunities with Leadership Rhode Island towards the end of today's session. But again, if you all can help me thank Dr. Miller and Michelle Carr as well. We appreciate you volunteering your brilliance with us. Again, all three of those sessions are recorded. So if you are interested in revisiting, or if you never got the slide deck or the video, please let us know and we're happy to help. Now it is time for the main event. So we tried to make this as clever as possible. This is a pre-recorded interview. So while I'm going to do my best to make it feel interactive and live time, know that if you do have questions for the author directly, we can send them to the author after, but they will not be answered in live time. So we appreciate your flexibility. We are super excited to highlight and elevate inclusion on purpose, an intersectional approach to creating a culture of belonging at work by Rachika Tulshyan. I think it was probably the most fun 45 minutes I've ever had talking with another human. So we're in for a treat today as she helps to remind us the importance of this work, as she explains her vision for writing this book and her hopes for us as leaders moving forward. So welcome and good morning. So the first question, and this is all over all of Rachika's book definitions and explanations. Inclusion takes awareness, intention, and regular practice. Awareness, intention, regular practice. How did she come to realize this? And I think a little birdie might have informed me that Rachika knows a little bit about community leadership, as she is a graduate herself of a community leadership program. So welcome the one and only, not live, but kind of live, Rachika Tulshyan, to answer how she came to define inclusion and how she came to remind us as leaders of our roles and responsibilities in creating inclusive environments. Hopefully the sound works. I tested it this morning. Larissa, give me a thumbs up or down when I press play.
One of the things in my bio that, perhaps is easily missed is I was part of a leadership program, quite like what you do there at Leadership Greater Hartford with Leadership Tomorrow here in Seattle. It was a very transformational, thing that I did. I would say it was beyond a leadership program. It really changed my life in so many ways. At that point, I was at this very interesting intersection between I was leaving my career in communications as a journalist and in content strategy at a high-tech firm. And I had deeply sort of seen some of the challenges of what it means to be a woman of color, both in terms of how I experienced the workplace, as well as what I was seeing and witnessing among women, people of color, trans women, people from the LGBTQ community. I mean, just working alongside and witnessing what it feels like to really be excluded, especially in situations where you love your job, you're so deeply tied to the mission, but deep inside you're like, I feel like I can't bring my full self to work, right? So I was sort of grappling with what do I do with this experience, and the fact that, like, I know that change can be made, but I don't know how. And going through a program like Leadership Tomorrow, a very dedicated program specifically looking at what it means to be a leader, how does it, how do you influence from behind? And the key takeaway for me was, look, leadership really requires you to bring in as many people to the fold as possible, right? And this is not controversial. Like this doesn't have to do with DEI. It's just if you're a leader, your job is to make sure that as many people under your care and around you are influenced to bring their best selves to whatever the situation and problem you're tackling at that moment. And it was very transformational for me to be part of a program like that, that also at that time, and we're talking a decade ago, really centered um, anti-racism, really centered what it means to be part of communities and create these innovative organizations at a time where there are also a lot of people in our society and communities who are being excluded, and how do we create that cross-sector collaboration. And so taking all of that and then working towards creating an organization, Candor, which I lead, which was very early in sort of in creating programs and education and awareness around inclusion, and a lot of what I was seeing out in the market when people are excluded gave me that unique insight into understanding that we do all want to do good. We all want to include people. We believe that people shouldn't be marginalized or excluded or left off sort of from the table. Most of the time, we, especially as leaders, we really want to operate from those good intentions. Unfortunately, the way that a lot of things are designed is we do end up excluding people if we're not intentional about it. And that really led me to inclusion on purpose. This idea that, look, you can have all the great intentions in the world. The important thing is to understand, how do we in every interaction, in our leadership, in our core leadership mission and values, how do we be inclusive? And that's why I wrote this book.
I told you she was phenomenal, right? I can't tell you how much time I spent listening to podcasts with Rachika, and just the heart that comes through and everything that she says, how she defines leadership. That is exactly how we define community leadership. So it's no surprise that Rachika also did a program. Shameless plug for those of you on the call who have not done a Leadership Greater Hartford or Leadership Rhode Island program. There are many opportunities to continue to get involved and to explore. One thing that Rachika and I talked about was, being invited to the table matters, right? Representation matters. And I told her, at 21, when I first started, I was given a seat at the table. My voice mattered. My opinions mattered. My concerns mattered. When I felt like I couldn't show up as my whole authentic self, I was able to have a conversation and a dialogue with leadership, express my point of view, learn from them, and find ways for all of us to move forward, right? That is an healthy organizational culture. And that is what Rachika talks a lot about in this book. So let's go on to question number 2. I could talk all day, but it's about Rachika. So we talked about why is it so difficult to foster inclusion in the workplace, right? She shares that we all want to be a part of a community. We want to connect and engage, but sometimes in the business landscape, that's a little difficult. And so why do leaders sometimes avoid this? Why do leaders sometimes not have all the skill sets to create an inclusive workplace environment? And so I asked Rachika to share some of her brilliance with us around this topic.
Right. And part of it is we're already segging into what I'm working on next, which is this idea of how so many of our structures are set up to make us believe that we need to compete rather than collaborate. And that is really the work I'm doing, and sort of moving on and building on the foundation with Inclusion on Purpose in my next book. But really, what I realized as I was writing this book, and I was really reflecting on both the case studies I have personally witnessed through the consulting I do, whether it's the speaking I do, or whether it's really reading the research, is a lot of people believe that when you go into the workplace, you have to put on this armor, you have to have your sharp elbows out, It's not necessary to ensure that everyone belongs. What's more important is like individuals stand up, so they're up for promotion, they're up for leadership, all of that. And I think that is a very core challenge that we face, and trying to undo that, because the research on being a collaborative leader, fostering team collaboration, psychological safety, I mean, even talk about psychological safety, right? Like the study that was done at Google that found that Project Aristotle found that all the teams that were the most innovative at this huge organization all really had one big thing in common, and that was they believe that the team had their back, right? That you have psychological safety within your organization. So I think it's in some ways undoing that narrative of like, you know, creating belonging isn't my job. In fact, creating belonging might actually create challenges for me to succeed as an individual, and actually recognizing that no, actually belonging is everyone's job. It's very much part of what makes us successful leaders. I would say I would like to see more organizations reward leaders for being collaborative, for creating belonging, for creating psychological safety. And when we've seen organizations do that, we've actually seen leadership capabilities really, really grow as a result of that. So I'd say that's the core of it. I think the other part of it is the unintentional sort of not recognizing everyday exclusionary actions in practice, right? So things like pronouncing people's names incorrectly, misgendering, or getting folks' pronouns wrong, not recognizing things like when there is, at this moment, for example, it's Ramadan, the Muslim holy month. So making that extra effort to understand that leadership is about creating belonging for everyone. And yes, there's opportunities for big programs and learning and education and awareness. I mean, I don't want to discount that, but it's also in those everyday interactions, right? As someone who wants to speak up at the meeting, like I can see them ready to speak and nobody's giving them an opportunity, right? Or research shows women are being interrupted in meetings or talked over, or credit being given to other people rather than them. So these sorts of everyday interactions often make the biggest difference in creating belonging.
Belonging is everyone's job. I love that. Right. And Rachika and I then went on to talk about um, the concept of fitting in versus belonging. And I shared that my very first paycheck here at LGH, I wanted to buy golf clubs because our president and CEO at the time was a big golfer. And I thought that that was me belonging, when in fact, it was really me trying to fit in. And in fact, he didn't care that I played golf at all. We found other ways to have a beautiful, robust relationship and connection. Um, and so we're super thankful for Rashika for sharing those words of wisdom with us. Belonging is everyone's job. And we then went back to the ADAPT framework that Michelle Carr talked about, right? Oftentimes when there are systems that aren't working, team tenants, team group norms, right? Oftentimes we have to go back and recalibrate those team norms. Because if they worked a year ago, they might not work this year, right? Because teams look different. Teams are evolving, right? And so it's important that we don't just have those tenets and those group norms that stick up on a wall and are never touched upon again. It's important that when Leadership Greater Hartford has our next staff meeting this summer, we're going to revisit those. We're going to revisit who's on the team, the personality and communication styles of the team. Because even when there's one new person on the team, it can drastically change the environment, right? And so what are we doing as leaders to create teams that are truly inclusive and empathetic? All right, I then went on to share that, the world looks much differently than what it did years ago. For those of us who studied DE and IB for a long time, we remember some of the trainings back in the 90s that probably caused a little more trauma than good, right? Great intention. Impact might not have been so amazing at the time, but I think in our community leadership programs, we're really focusing on the range of experience and understanding that every person has, right? On our team, we had 21 to in their 80s. And so we all don't see the world the same. We all have different sets of lived experiences. So how can we acknowledge that we're all at different levels of understanding when it comes to some of these DE and IB practices, right? We're not going to get it right all the time. We have to give ourselves graces, but what can we do as leaders to really understand that we are all at different places, and that's okay. Let's celebrate that and let's learn from that. And so this is what Rachika shared regarding that.
I love this question because it requires so much of nuance. So I want to say that one of the things that I feel lucky to do in the work I do is I actually meet a lot of older in terms of age leaders who have been in this fight from day one, right? And many of them have had to do it quietly or even had to like mask how they really thought about the world or even their own lived experiences because it wasn't safe. So I think sometimes in sort of these big media headlines, like older generations, don't believe in inclusion, younger generations are all about inclusion, and there's this tussle. I really want to say that I've kind of seen the opposite in both ends of the spectrum. So I have definitely met older leaders seasoned leaders who have been, four decades into 4 or 5, sometimes decades into their careers, who have really deeply believed in gender rights, LGBTQ rights, anti-racism, all of that, probably without the language because it wasn't safe to do so, but really in that. And I have also, on the other hand, I have definitely, I've taught university classes. I have definitely interacted with younger people who also often feels, I mean, there's research to show that especially younger men are feeling much more threatened by feminism than we thought, right? There's good research now to show that across countries in various different countries, there's this belief that women's rights advancing means men's rights are regressing again. And this is again something that I'm looking at in my next book around the zero sum, like you win, I lose type of thing. But I digress. So firstly, I want to add, like, I just really want to add that nuance that sometimes in these sweeping, like, older people are anti, DEI and younger people are pro DEI, and there's sort of, we're on different sides of this coin is something that I want to caution against, right? Like, there is nuance to this. At the same time, I mean, I think it's true. I think it's fair to say that younger people or people who are coming into the workplace now often have the language, right? So, or we've been much more conditioned in our education and in what we see in the media right now. It's, we see LGBTQ leaders featured. We see leaders of various different races and ethnicities and lived experiences in a way that even, as a former journalist, even in the media 15, 20 years ago, it just wasn't that prevalent. So I think we need to have a little bit of compassion for folks who have grown up where it wasn't safe to really be where you are. I think, again, bringing this back to the idea of inclusion is really important. This idea of, at its core, inclusion is about creating an opportunity for everyone to feel leadership, and inclusion is about, everyone feeling feeling like they have the opportunity to lead and show up as their full selves in the workplace. And that's regardless of whether you're a young leader coming into the market or you've been a seasoned leader and executive for decades. So I think having some level of compassion and empathy around that is really important.
We then went in to talk about the BRIDGE acronym that Rachika shares on how to create inclusivity using a growth mindset, right? When we say leadership, when we say leaders or educators or whatever we're called to do in life, leadership is a journey, right? And as I shared in my opening remarks, there's always more to learn. So it was really exciting to get a new tool from Rachika using the BRIDGE acronym. We'll put it up on the screen so you could see what it means. But it really is about fostering a team, an environment where people know, it's okay to fail sometimes. Because if we're not failing, we're probably not growing. And so let's listen to Rachika as she shares some of her thoughts on that.
Thank you for sharing your sort of education background, because I loved and I remember being so moved and transformed by reading the work, Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck from Stanford, who really looked at the importance of having a growth mindset in education, really in the K-12 education system, the difference between students who come into the classroom and are like, I already have all the knowledge that I'll ever have. So if I'm bad at math, I'm bad at math forever, versus the growth mindset, right? The students who come into the classroom, they're like, I may be terrible at math, but I can grow and I can learn and I'm going to practice and get better. And so reading that and sort of looking at over a long-term academic career of students, what it means to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, how much a growth mindset leads to success and all sorts of positive things, really seeing that take in leadership and in management and leadership theory, it clicked this sort of button in me where I realized that with a lot of things around inclusion, with a lot of what it means to create a psychological safety and inclusion in the workplace requires a growth mindset, right? Like none of us have been conditioned, for example, to have conversations on race, right? Many of us have never understood or never been sort of conditioned, unfortunately, living in a patriarchal, sort of heteronormative society. We may have never encountered someone who's openly gay. I certainly didn't growing up in Singapore. And so what I started realizing is what if we could apply those principles of growth mindset? We don't know everything. We are going to get things wrong. We are going to make mistakes. That doesn't mean it's not worth trying. What if we could apply that to how we approach inclusion, right? And that again could mean in having these very important, necessary conversations and interactions and even in creating the curriculum and programming that you do around leadership, there are going to be mistakes that are made. There are going to be, times where you upset someone inadvertently, or you get it wrong, or there's been a change in how we approach, for example, in language around ableism and language around LGBTQ communities and rights. I mean, we're constantly evolving in our society. And so for me, creating the Bridge acronym was really about that. It's about marrying the idea of having a growth mindset and sort of the principles of creating a more inclusive environment, right? And your mindset that needs to change when we're thinking about creating a more inclusive environment. So I know you have the acronym next to me rather, and on the screen, but I really wanted to zero in on a couple of the ones that matter to me. I would say the most. I mean, of course, it's all important, but I really like the idea of in the Bridge acronym, the R, right, reflecting on what you don't know, because I think one of the challenges that we have, especially in leadership positions where you're dealing with crises, you have to make decisions really quickly, you have to keep on moving, things had to be delivered yesterday. I think sometimes being able to slow down, to carve out some time to think about who's not represented on my team, what are the perspectives that are missing, whose perspectives that do I personally not know, right? And being able to then with the I invite feedback, I think is really important in creating a more inclusive environment. Of course, the D, defensiveness doesn't help. It really doesn't. And I always think of when someone has said to me, and it's happened many times, and I've tried to be as candid, even in the book, when someone said to me, hey, you said this thing or you behaved in this way. I'm sure your intentions were good, but here's how it landed, right? You were being exclusionary without knowing, or maybe even knowing, but I just wanted to share this with you. I really see it as a gift of love, right? Because it takes a lot, especially if you're from a community that's been historically marginalized. It takes a lot to step up and be like, hey, I just wanted to challenge this thing that happened. And so I really try and sit with that feedback. I invite other perspectives. I do a lot of reading and sort of self-reflection, and then apologize really sincerely. And really the best way you can make changes by literally showing that you're making change from the feedback. And then the last part of the Bridge acronym, which I think is important, is also expect that change takes time. I think, again, for some of us, and Andre, I know you're you're nodding, for those of us in this field, it can feel very disheartening, especially when you see challenges against DEI that we see in society today. It can be very hard to take the long view, but I always remind folks that it's in those day-to-day interactions, like changing minds and hearts on a day-to-day basis, how we interact with people, how much belonging we create for people on a day-to-day basis, that is just as meaningful, if not more. So than, for example, a big initiative launching within an organization.
Thank you. Ruchika was referring to the fact that throughout our whole 45 minutes, I was nodding my head ferociously because she just had so many mic drop moments of things that reminded me of things that I've learned before, and new pieces of information that I'm definitely going to add to my toolbox. So I also want to take the moment, if you are like me and then are noticing that typo on the screen right there, I apologize. It was much smaller on my screen. So hopefully you'll give me a little grace. That was my fault. I see some of you laughing. That's good. That means you're with me this morning. Thank you. Laughter is okay. And I really wanted to give Ruchika some time just to give some closing thoughts. It's always truly special when you're meeting another leader who really gets the work that you do. And because Ruchika is a graduate of a community leadership program, we got to go a little deeper than maybe normal. So I was excited to have Ruchika just give some final closing thoughts. We'll hear directly from her, and then we're going to go to our breakouts. We are right on time, friends. So final thoughts from Ruchika on inclusion on purpose.
Well, thank you so much to the Leadership Greater Hartford Network for inviting me and being part of this. I have to say that this type of work takes a lot of energy, and it takes, really that level of passion and optimism. The cautiously optimistic person in me will always say that it means a lot that people are engaging in this work, because I feel like people feel like there's a choice not to, but it really brings so much more humanity and compassion into our work. So it means a lot that you're part of this. In terms of that connection between leadership and inclusion on purpose, I see it as it's absolutely deeply intertwined. I see inclusion as leadership. I feel like that you can't really be a leader without ensuring leadership is right at the forefront of what you believe and what you practice. And so I'd love to hear from more of you. I'd love to hear about what are some of the things that went well, what were some of the challenges. I think many leaders in this work in real time can really share both those wins and those challenges. And I think it means a lot to be part of a network to be able to share that. You need to have safe spaces. I mean, when I'm asked, even among DEI professionals in really, really visible jobs, how do I keep myself going? I always talk about the importance of having a network of people who have your back, who you can be really candid with. I look at my LT Seattle group as someone, many of the alumni that I'm still closely connected with as really deeply part of my tribe, where I'll be like, hey, today was really hard. This thing happened. I'm working on this issue with a client or an employee or a friend. And, what advice do you have for me? So thank you for doing this work.
Thank you. Uh, Ruchika was thanked very much in my interview. If you can't tell, I'm a huge fan, and it's always so wonderful to hear from a leader, especially that has such a different lived experience than my own. And I think we spend a lot of time really diving into that and learning from one another. And in fact, I was struggling to come up with a breakout activity, and Rashika helped me remember a 3-2-1 activity that we used to do, which will elevate and bring to light what she just said about how we can talk about our wins and our failures and challenges and our goals for the future. So that is what we are going to do in our last few minutes together. First and foremost, I do want to thank our breakout room facilitators. I know there's a few people on this list that couldn't actually make it this morning, so we're gonna send them some positive wishes. Hopefully they're doing okay. But we are a smaller team this morning, so I think we're still gonna make it work with the facilitators that we have. So again, thank you to everyone who not only volunteered their talents and gifts this session, but throughout any of the other sessions as well. So we are going to do something that we do in some of our programs. We're going to do a little 3-2-1 activity. So May's going to pop this into the chat. And I want to give everyone some time and space to think about 3 things that you either learned as a result of this series and conversations, or things that you're reminded about, right? Again, because we're connecting the synapses from what we're talking about today to what we've learned previously, right? So 3 things that you learned or were reminded about, 2 things you might want to continue to learn more about or unpack, and then 1 thing that you might do as an individual to bring some of these concepts to life, right? It could be adding one activity into your daily routine that demonstrates your empathy for your teammates, right? Whatever that one thing is, we want to make sure that we're always progressing, we're always um, adapting to the needs of our team and those that we care about. So 3 things you learned or were reminded, 2 things you want to continue to learn more about, and 1 thing that you're going to do slightly different. And with that, I'm going to stop my share. The worst part, thank you, Janelle. I was just going to ask. The worst part is having to close those rooms because I know everyone's enjoying the conversation. But I did want to provide a few minutes for us to share in the large room. So we have about 12 minutes. So do I have any friends that want to unmute themselves and share? You don't have to do all of the full activity. You can give me a highlight of something you learned or were reminded about, something you want to continue to learn, or something that you might do differently in your daily behaviors.
Well, in my group, we had a really great conversation, lots of conversation around inclusion and planting the seed and fostering collaboration. Being invited to the table was what we ended on, and it really resonated for me that so many people, don't think they have a voice, and if we don't offer it to them, that, we don't get that, the goodness of bringing new and ideas and people and thoughts to the table. But we had some really great conversation in all 3 categories. So I really appreciate my group. Anybody can jump in if they want to say something else.
And now I know everyone's saying their group was the best, so you are all correct. Each of your groups were truly the best. Thank you, Tracy, for sharing. This is our time, friends. Feel free to unmute yourself, to share, to question.
So I'll go for group 5. Some of the things that I really appreciated were what people are going to do differently. And I appreciated that there were like small attainable changes, right? So one was being more intentional about leaving space in meetings for people to speak up, and then making the intentional invitation if there's a voice that hasn't been heard. So not only taking a bit longer to make sure that people who may not be first to jump in have the opportunity to join in, but then also taking the time to do an invitation to make sure those who may be newer to a group feel included. And then the other one was brought up by Ruchika's comment, that names are really important, right? And so there was a lot of discussion that some people have given up on going by their full name because it's just too hard. It's not, sort of seen as a common or normal name in the office. So they've shortened it or they've changed it. But that is a part that keeps them from really feeling like they belong. And so the importance of focusing on how to say people's names, and taking the time to learn and be really focused on that as one small way to help people feel more included. So that resonated with our full group.
Thank you, Larissa. I appreciate that. Yeah, names are our identities, right? And so it's important that we respect one another to learn. Larissa usually has her name written out. Not today, which was funny, but thank you.
For the record,
Larissa.
I didn't start that conversation.
Oh, there you go.
Elsewhere, but it resonated with me too.
Betty Ann, I know you didn't get to chime in last time. I saw you put something in the chat. Is there anything you want to expand upon?
Oh, I'll just say thank you to our group because we did have a great conversation, and it was so sad to be cut off in the middle of Grace's discussion about a rubric that her team had developed to actually measure how people feel belonging and what ideas might they implement to do better. So I thought that was a great thing that you could actually do. We did talk a lot about empathy and how some people feel it more than others, and you can't, you bring your own biases to the table. But just a lot of great discussion. Also, we talked about the COVID impact and so much being on Zoom and online, and how is that detrimental to our sense of belonging and community. So thank you to my group.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just remind everyone that sharing is caring. So if you have a dynamic tool that you want to share with us, please feel free to pop it in the chat. Um, thank you. How about other friends? We have time for a couple more. Let's see. Who hasn't spoken yet?
My
Who-
group, this is Debbie. My group mentioned some pretty interesting things, that the idea of, as leaders, logic seems to be the first requirement, and empathy takes second shrift. You're trying to get things done quickly, and I thought that was really the idea, that collaboration versus competition and empathy versus logic, that those things, one has to be given up for the other. So the idea of being more intentional about empathy, or about belonging, or about collaboration in those instances where the culture sort of speaks to competition and logic and quick reactions, taking the pause and really reading the room, if you will. Really good ideas that people came up with about doing that, and how important it is to do regular small bits of it, rather than this take it all as one big chunk, but a daily sort of practice with it and
Yeah,
reflection.
that's
So
powerful.
thank you.
There's a lot that we can observe as leaders during that silence, right? And it's important to pay attention to that. Often when I teach public speaking, I remind people that musicians put rests in music for a reason. It's just as important as the notes being played, right? It gives us time to catch up, to connect the dots, to feel, to think, right? That's super important in dialogue as well. So I appreciate you calling that out. I do want to call out a friend who's on here. Our very first facilitator from session one, Mari Serrano, is here. Mari, I don't know if you're there and active and you want to say hello, or
Hi y'all. Good
how
morning.
how was your conversation?
It was beautiful. It was a beautiful conversation. I think we had a lot of insights around what truly belonging is, and especially within our respective role, and how we have to really feel it. You can't measure it, right? It's something that it has to be really intentional and thoughtful. And so it was truly a great experience to walk through this full session as a cohort with you all, just to read through the book, but also put into practice what we are experiencing as leaders each and every day, which is all hard work, but also a lot of passionate work, especially thinking about being people-centric. So I know the conversation will continue on even after this space, as we build more cultures of belonging in our respective organizations and communities. And so really looking forward to it. Thanks, Andre, for giving me the spotlight and just sharing some of my thoughts.
Thank you. And all of us on the call can visit the connection and attend their unifying threads conversations, which are powerful and dynamic in their own right. So thank you, Mari, for getting us started and for sharing this morning.
Of course.
Time for one or two more. Anyone interested in unmuting and sharing a little bit more? Well, if we want a few extra minutes back, I'm okay with that too. So let me pull up my slide deck. Good morning, Barbara. Look at that smile. You just made you made my day, Barbara. Thank you for laughing at my horrible jokes. All right. Hopefully I can share my screen again. Here we go. So we had 4 amazing discussions, right? We talked about privilege. We talked about the power that each of us possess within the work that we're doing. We talked about the responsibility being all of ours. We talked about, we learned some tools and some tips and some acronyms from Rachika and from all of our guest speakers on things that we can incorporate into our leadership styles and practices. But inclusion takes awareness, intentionality, and practice. Practice, practice, practice. Creating a culture of belonging is everyone's responsibility, and leadership is about ensuring that we all feel seen, heard, and valued. And Inclusion on Purpose is a dynamic book that has helped start the conversation. Hopefully, as Mari shared, we all want to continue to have this conversation. It's not just a one-off, right? It's how can we take these conversations and these experiences and integrate them into our leadership. So thank you all for sharing. Thank you all for being present and engaged today. I do have a few other thank yous and then we'll get out of here. So here we go. Again, thank you to our three presenters, Mari, Michelle Carr, Dr. Miller. Thank you for Ruchika Telshian for sharing her wisdom with us. We still have some books left for sale, folks. So if you are looking for gifts to give to your leadership team, may you purchase them through LGH. If you come to future programs, you might receive a book as a gift because we like giving leadership resources out to our friends and program participants. So thank you all. I did share Leadership Rhode Island is a great partner of ours. So we here in Connecticut are part of a larger community initiative called the Association of Leadership Programs. It's where we all get together and share some best practices to learn from one another and to find ways that we can continue to engage and empower our program participants and alumni so that we as community leadership practitioners can all move our systems to be more equitable and inclusive. So there's a national conference coming up in Providence. We are excited to share that Leadership Greater Hartford is playing a large role in some of that planning. Some of us serve on the board of ALP, but more excitingly, they have an alumni track. So if you've gone through some of our programs and want to participate, you don't have to just be a community leadership practitioner. You can be an enthusiast, a lover, a supporter, a fan, and they will have some leadership opportunities for anyone who's interested in attending the conference. So for more information, I believe May Maloney is putting in the chat how we all can sign up for that. They do have day passes, so if you can come out for a day, please do. It's nothing is more exciting than being in a room with people who love leadership and love community like we all do. Again, we want to give a huge thank you to our series sponsor, Express Strategies. We are so appreciative of your support, your dedication to the mission of Leadership Greater Hartford. And we just want to thank you, thank you, thank you. To all of our visionary sponsors here at Leadership Greater Hartford, we appreciate your continued support as well. It makes programs like this and others possible. None of us do this alone, right? So it's nice to see this big, beautiful list of supporters and champions. And for those of you that want to continue to get involved in LGH programming, if you are an executive that's new to the region or new to a leadership role and you want to get back out in the community for some immersive community tours, our executive orientation program starts this fall. If you know of anyone that is of the third age that wants to continue to learn, continue to experience, and continue to give back, our Third Age Initiative is also recruiting for this fall. We continuously have opportunities for connection and engagement through our Leaders on Board program. As many of you know, we've matched over 1,000 people to serve on many, many boards and commissions thanks to the support of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. So we offer monthly trainings and sessions where we connect individuals to a diverse array of nonprofit organizations, all seeking talented, committed individuals to help their causes. And lastly, if you're interested in any sort of individual training or opportunity for your team, Leadership Greater Hartford has a wide array of dynamic consultants that we partner with, so we can construct and design any sort of learning experience for you and your team. So if you're interested, please contact me. May will put my email in the chat as well. And super excited that tickets and raffle tickets are now on sale for our annual Polaris Awards. We're highlighting 3 dynamic individuals and organizations, as you can see here, who are doing great work within our community, and we want to celebrate them. So it's a night of fun, it's a night of celebration, it's a night of relationship building. We promise to have great food, great live entertainment, So please take a look at the link in the chat and register and sign up and join us for the evening. With that, it is 9:13, 2 minutes back in your day. Thank you all for being here, for continuing the conversation, and we look forward to working with all of you again in the future. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.